Welcome into another episode of Always Talking Ball. I guess you could say that this is our official season kickoff episode because we are starting win totals tonight, and we are starting in the Atlantic Coast Conference, which of course is not just the Atlantic Coast anymore. We've got major ACC storylines to talk about, win totals, as I already mentioned, dark horse picks, and ACC championship game picks. I'm your host, Tyler Noe, and with me, as always, for another year of college football is my partner, Lance Barton. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. You know the drill by now. Like and subscribe on whatever platform that you're tuning in on. Share it with your friends. I know that they are starting to ask you about college football because, unlike you, they haven't been listening all off season. So just tell them to check out Always Talking Ball. Also, just give us a rating too, whatever platform you're listening to or watching on. I'm going to channel my past Enterprise rent-a-car experience here, and we'd love to have that 5-star rating. But we're also all about honesty here on ATB. One more order of business. We haven't mentioned our good friends over at Home Field Apparel in a while. But all month of August, they are having a can't-miss kickoff special. 80-plus teams, over 300 new products. They have schools from every single FBS conference. You can go in, put your school in, put your email in. They'll notify you when something new is dropping. This week, they are launching Home Field Platinum boxes, where you can get a specially curated box of unbelievably awesome gear to get you ready for the 2024 season. I know you have that special shirt that you wear every game, and when you wear it, your team never loses, except for when they do. But you know you need some new gear. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, head over to homefieldapparel.com, or if you're watching on YouTube, scan that QR code in the top right of your screen, and when you're checking out, type in the promo code ATB15, and we'll even give you 15% off. It doesn't get much better than that. Homefieldapparel.com, promo code ATB15. Lance, give me some of your top storylines in the ACC. Let's get rolling.
Well, you know, conference realignment, baby. We've got a whole brand new ACC, and dude, nothing spells ACC more than I don't think of anything more about the ACC until I think of Palo Alto, California,
For sure.
or Berkeley. I mean, Cal and Stanford are in the ACC now, and the Ponies.
Also Dallas, yeah.
Exactly. The Ponies, man. SMU in the ACC now. So, again, conference realignment has made college football just, flip turned upside down. It's so much different than any year that we've ever seen. So it's going to be interesting with all of these conferences with the new realignment and the different teams, new teams in it, with the style of play, different styles of play, et cetera. So,
yeah, man, the ACC is clearly sputtering right now. And if you think about the history of this ACC, between 1992 and 2020, the ACC produced 5 national champions, and they had 5 more teams that lost in the national title game. Obviously, bookended by Florida State and Clemson, but man, it's crazy to see how far the conference has fallen over the recent half decade or so.
No, I don't disagree. And so the new teams, SMU, Cal, and Stanford, we'll just go with the 2 Pac-12 teams that are coming to the ACC. Which ones do you think has the most long-term success, if you had to say right now? Not just this year, but let's say for the next 10 years. Who do you think has the most success, if you had to say it?
My gut instinct is probably Stanford.
Yeah, I think so too. I like Troy Taylor at Stanford. I think he's going to do a good job if they give him the time. He took over a pretty tough job there at Stanford with the new NIL and transfer portal era. But Justin Wilcox is another good coach at Cal. He could be one of those that you might see here soon, kind of like Chip Kelly, what he did at UCLA. You might see Justin Wilcox be one of those that one of your big-time power programs throws a lot of money his way to just come be a defensive coordinator instead of having to deal with what he's going to have to deal with out there at Cal and try to recruit players in California to want to go all the way across country to play conference games. But some other storylines that has been huge this offseason, probably the biggest from the ACC this offseason, is all the rumors of possibly Florida State, Clemson, mainly those two, trying to leave the conference, all of the different litigation, lawsuits, et cetera, that's going on, trying to get out of that grant of rights deal. I'm sure you saw it the other day, but what would be your thoughts if Florida State, Clemson, Virginia Tech, and NC State joined America's conference, the Big 12?
I just can't see Florida State and Clemson stooping that low. They just think of themselves, especially Florida State, they think of themselves so highly that they're like, we're not going anywhere except for the SEC or the Big Ten. And the rumors are The Big Ten and the SEC, as of this moment, they don't want them.
Yeah,
And
that's what I've heard
I don't
too.
blame them. Why split more of the pie?
No, I don't disagree. I mean, right now you'd just be splitting more pieces of the pie. No doubt about it, Fox, ESPN would have to, if I'm a Big Ten institution, I'm going to Fox and ESPN and saying, if we're bringing more teams in, we're getting more money, because I don't want to lose any of the pieces of the pie that we've already got. But I will remind everybody something. If you remember what the Big Ten said, and then a month later, the Big Ten said, we're not looking at Washington and Oregon right now. And then boom, Washington and Oregon going to the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
So just interesting cat and mouse game, and I think that these conferences are going to be playing with each other on that. Just something to keep an eye on. And as far as play on the field that we're about to get into with our win totals for this upcoming season, I mean, dude, it seems to me that there's more depth. And like last year, it was pretty much just, Florida State, and I know Louisville played for the ACC championship, but it's pretty much just been Florida State, Clemson for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Every now and then somebody else sprinkled in, but there seems to be more depth and less separation from the top 6 or 7 teams in the conference this year. And I mean, the Vegas odds tell you that as well, with win totals for the projected top 7 teams in this league going into this year. They're only separated by 1 game, ranging from 9.5 wins to 8.5 wins. So the top 7 teams in the league are pretty much ranging from a win total of 9.5 to 8.5. So that just tells you how close this conference is this year. But Tyler, without any further ado, man, let's not hold the people up anymore. Folks, get those betting apps ready. It's time for some win totals. It's win total season, baby. Start us off here, man. Who's your first squad that you're going with for over-under on a season win total? What we got?
Well, there's a traditional, top 3 that are in this league. You mentioned Florida State and Clemson. There's Miami. There's another one there. Obviously, with Miami, we've so long said Mario can recruit his butt off, but in-game coaching remains a biggest question mark. But this is the most stacked roster he's ever had. Florida State, they're going to be coming back with a vengeance after being left out of the playoffs last year. Clemson's all they've done is won 7 out of the last 9 ACC titles, but I'm not going with any of them. I'm going with the newcomer from Dallas, who I've been high on all off season, and that's the SMU Mustangs. You can find them on DraftKings right now with a win total of 8. I think with 82% returning production, which is top 20 in the country, I don't think they have a typical G5 roster. I think that obviously, they played 2 Power 2 or Power 4 conferences, Power 5 last year, Oklahoma and TCU, and didn't fare well in either game. That's fine. I think the ACC is a little different, and I think that the schedule makers obviously did them wonders. They got the easiest ACC schedule. Kelly Ford, last episode, we talked about SMU, 66th hardest schedule out of 68 FBS teams. So I'm taking the over 8 for the SMU Mustangs. I think Rhett Lashley is on a high. I think they're not going to be like those Big 12 teams we saw make the G5 to P4 jump last year. I think that, as we've said all along, I think they've got a real shot to win 10 games. I mean, if you look at their schedule, they open up at Nevada, who is not very good. They get Houston Christian. They get BYU on a Friday night, but it's at home. They get TCU at home. Their first ACC game is hosting Florida State. Okay?
Nice.
Now, that one, obviously, I think they're going to be underdogs in that, but they're going to be hyped up for that, and don't be surprised if they play that game really tough. The very next week, they go to Louisville. That's going to be a tough one. But their other road games are Stanford, Duke, and Virginia. Okay? And then their home games after that are Pitt, Boston College, and Cal.
Yeah, they're getting all of the bottom. They're getting almost all of the bottom tier teams in the conference.
Exactly. So I think 8, if you can find it on DraftKings right now, as of Sunday night, 8 wins for SMU is very, very doable.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, man. You mentioned that the roster of, as far as like some of those teams that made the jump to the Big 12 last year, and you said that you don't think SMU has just your typical Group G5 type roster. I don't disagree, man. If you look at a lot of their transfers from the last 2 years, I mean, they've got dudes coming from Miami, Oklahoma. They've got guys coming from bigger programs that are coming their way. And Preston Stone, quarterback, I mean, he made my top 12 returning quarterbacks in the country this year. The numbers he put up last year in Lashley's offense were incredible. They've got like 3 tailbacks that are all like 2 of them are former Power 5 transfers themselves. So yeah, man, that's not a bad pick. It's interesting seeing that it seems like some people are in agreement with you because their win total was at 7.5 recently, and then, like you said, 8 on DraftKings. There's even some 8.5s popping up in other shops, but 8 is a very fair number there. So all right, so the ponies, one of the newcomers, over 8 for Tyler right out of the gate. I'm not gonna fool around here, man. I'm gonna go with Tyler. I'm just gonna say it. The Dabo, Sweeney, and Clemson just hate and slander it's too much, man. It's gone too far. I get that Dabo's not recruiting he's not recruiting the transfer portal. He's losing some players in the transfer portal, and he's not backfilling them in the portal. I get all of that. He's not really adjusting to major parts of the NIL, but guys, this roster is one of the top 10, top 15 rosters in the entire country. Dabo is still like won multiple national championships. Clemson won the ACC championship game 2 years ago. So I see FanDuel currently has Clemson with a win total of 8.5. That is utter disrespect. And if they want to it's heavily juiced to the over, but I'm going to take Clemson over 8.5 wins here is my first win total, and just have to take a shot at it. Last year, Clemson won 8 games. They went 8-4 in the regular season. It was the first time in 13 years that they won less than 9 games in a regular season. So in the last 13 years, they've gone over this number of 8.5 12 times. Last year, no doubt, the issue was the offense. It was not the defense. I mean, the defense last year was top 10 again under defensive coordinator Wes Goodwin. It was 2 years in a row of top 10 finishes since he replaced Brent Venables. I love one of the hires that they made. They brought in one of their old defensive line coaches, longtime journeyman, Chris Rumpf. Chris Rumpf was the D-line coach for the Minnesota Vikings last year. He's got over 15 years of college football experience at places like Clemson in the past, Alabama, Texas, and Florida. And they bring back middle linebacker Barrett Carter, who you can make an argument that's the best middle linebacker in the entire country. But the offense, again, was the problem last year. Tyler, listen to some of these numbers, man. They finished 118th in red zone scoring last year, scoring on just 73% of their trips to the red zone. They finished in the bottom 8 of the entire country in turnovers lost. And Klubnik himself, QBK Klubnik, had 9 interceptions and 5 fumbles. They were 87th in pass efficiency. And again, they lost 4 games total. 3 of those were by 1 possession with numbers that I just gave you. So if they just don't turn the ball over, or if they just get a little bit better on the offensive side of the ball, Clemson's a much better football team. And if you remember, Dabo said last year at one point towards later in the season when they started winning some games at the end of the year and started looking a little bit better, beat Notre Dame at home, won their bowl game against Kentucky, he said, if Clemson was a stock, you better buy all you can freaking get, is what he said in his interview. So, Dabo, say less. I'm buying that stock. I got Clemson over 8.5 wins. And I'm looking at, again, this schedule. I'm just going to go ahead and say the Georgia game, that's a loss. They're not beating Georgia. If somebody wants to clip this, if that happens, that's fine. I guess you're just smarter than everybody else if you think that Clemson can beat Georgia. But they get NC State's one of their toughest games. We like NC State. More on them here in a minute. But the Wolfpack, they get a bye before they play NC State at home in Death Valley. Now, they do have to go to Florida State. Obviously, that's probably the main game that's circled. And they go to Blacksburg. So that game in Blacksburg is going to be a good one. Virginia Tech probably coming to that game.
If Virginia Tech is what we think they're going to be.
Yep, agreed. So if I'm looking at this schedule right, again, I've got to get to 8-4. So 4 losses are what have to beat me. They're going to lose to Georgia, so I got to find 3 more. I don't think they're going to lose both games to NC State and Louisville, both at home in Death Valley Mid, when Clemson's got a bye going into both of those games, by the way. Dabo coming off a bye, Clemson coming off a bye, going into both of those games with multiple weeks to prepare. Don't think they're losing both of those games. So I feel pretty confident that Clemson can get to 9-3. I personally have Clemson going 10-2. So I've got 2 games to play with for it to beat me. So I'll take Clemson over 8.5.
Okay.
You can get that at FanDuel.
Back in Dabo and the Tigers.
Yep.
I'm going to take a trip up to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Have a little chat with Dave Clawson, our boy, who we think is just, we're huge Dave Clawson believers. I mean, he's a great head coach. Their win total right now on DraftKings is 4.5 games. 4.5 games for Wake Forest. I mean, I know they struggled last year. They won 4 games. Offense didn't look great. Quarterback with Mitch Griffiths and whoever else they were trotting out there was just rough. They didn't have their boy Sam Hartman for the first time in what seemed like a decade. So it was rough. Well, they got a transfer to come in who played at Louisiana Tech and played at Boise State. Old Hank Bachmeier from Boise State coming in to sling the rock. They still running the slow mesh up there in Winston-Salem?
You know they are, man. You know they are.
Exactly. So 4.5 wins for Wake Forest, I think, should be doable. You look at their schedule. You got North Carolina A&T right off the bat. That's good. You get a home game against Virginia. I think you can win that one. You start off 2-0. You got Ole Miss coming into town. That's a tough one. You're not going to be able to win that one. You get a bye week, and then you get Louisiana. So I think you could start off 3-1. You look at their conference schedule difficulty. It's 10th in the ACC. So it's middle of the pack. They've got a home game at Clemson, which is rough. You would like to see that on the road, kind of chalking that one up as a loss already. But they do have a road game sandwiched in between Clemson and Stanford at UConn. So you're thinking, okay, that's a 4th win right there. All you got to do is find one more. You play at Stanford, like I mentioned. We talked about them. You get a bye, and then you play Cal at home on a Friday night, making the cross-country trek there. And you get Duke at home at the end of the year. I mean, I could see Wake Forest going 6-6. I could see him going bowling this year.
Yeah, I mean, Dave Clawson, again, in some of these win totals, I love backing good coaches.
Yeah.
And Dave Clawson's got a history of overachieving, doing more with less, etc. Last year is definitely an outlier of his career at Wake. So, I mean, when you're getting a number like that where all you got to do is get to 5. Yeah, all you got to do is get to 5. It shows you how far they've fallen off with, they've, again, got crushed by the transfer portal again. They're one of those that are just getting
they're one of the ones that kind of like Clemson, kind of like Stanford. They're just not really going into the portal as much. They've taken a couple guys, but they're just, and unlike Clemson, they don't have the recruiting to fall back on. So that's been their big downfall, and kind of just shows the true food chain that is college football.
No, I don't disagree, man. I don't disagree. So, all right. So you've got Wake over 4.5.
Wake over 4.5 on DraftKings.
All right. Well, I'm going to head to Blacksburg, Virginia. Been waiting for this one to talk about this, and you can see over my shoulder here that Virginia Tech helmet signed by Mike Vick. By the way, again, my entire family is from the New River Valley area of Virginia, Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Radford. My dad played quarterback in high school for Frank Beamer. Frank Beamer's first ever coaching job in his life was at Radford High School, and my dad was his quarterback in high school. So got a lot of roots there in that New River Valley district there in Virginia. And the Hokies, they've been rough the last several years. Not what we were used to in the heyday of the Frank Beamer era. And I think that you can go ahead and say that this year is the best chance that Virginia Tech has had to be back. And they've got a win total of 8.5. And what I love about this is the juice right here of plus 124. So I'm getting plus money on this on FanDuel of over 8.5. So I like Virginia Tech over 8.5. Let's talk about their team this year. So offense, they return all 11 starters. Overall, the team in general is one of the teams that has the most returning production in the entire country. And including of that all 11 starters, that does not even include wide receiver Ollie Jennings, who was the number 1 wide receiver in the transfer portal coming into last year. He was coming out of Old Dominion, had over 2,000 yards receiving and 14 touchdowns in 2 years at Old Dominion. He got hurt first game last year and missed the entire season. He's back. So he's not even included when I talked about the all 11 starters on offense. But when you want to talk about the offense, we got to talk about Kyron Jones, quarterback Kyron Jones. About 6'5", 235 pounds, can move. The dude's a freak. He's about as good as a dual threat quarterback as you can get as far as upside is concerned and things that these pro scouts drool over. If he could take a leap this year in the passing game, you're talking about a guy that every year we see these quarterbacks that come out of nowhere to be a first-round pick that's not projected to be a first-rounder. Drones definitely has the capability to be a type of guy like that with his frame, his athletic ability, his strength, etc. But last year, Virginia Tech averaged 60 rushing yards per game in their first 4 games, and they started 1-3. And that all happened before Drones took over. After he took over, they started averaging 213 rushing yards per game. So they went from 60 rushing yards per game to 213 rushing yards per game. And after, they said they started 1-3. Drones took over. They went 6-3 down the stretch after he became the full-time starter. One of the preview magazines that I love to read, Pick Six Previews, they had Virginia Tech 68 out of 70 power conference teams in offense through their first few games without Drones. They jumped 39 spots to 29th in the country by the end of the season, just after Drones took over. Drones was 3rd in the nation in rushing by quarterbacks, and he only started 9 games out of 800 yards rushing. And he had a 17 touchdown to 3 interception ratio. But again, he's got to improve his completion percentage and improve his downfield passing game. And I think he'll do that because he was raw last year. So defense, they returned 9 starters. Brent Pry and DC Chris Marv. They brought back that Bud Foster type swarming D last year, getting after the quarterback, getting a lot of tackles for losses, sacks, etc. They used to call themselves Sack U. So I think that's kind of returned. They finished top 20 in the country overall last year in total defense, 4th in the nation against the pass, 2nd in the nation in sacks. They were top 10 in the country at creating negative plays. So I mean, overall, I really like this Virginia Tech team on the field in general, and I love the schedule that they got. Their schedule is equally as important as to why I'm going over 8.5 with this team this year. They play at Vanderbilt, Marshall, and at Old Dominion and Rutgers in their non-conference. They should definitely start 3-0. And before anybody wants to snarl their nose about what I'm going to say, old Greg Schiano and Rutgers is going to be a good football team this year. They were good last year, and they're going to be really good again this year. So Rutgers and Blacksburg, September the 21st. I think if they do start 4-0, I feel really good at them getting over that 8.5 total. And they're going to be favored in all 4 of those games, obviously. But they go on a Friday night to Miami. That one's going to be a tough one. I personally got that one right now as a loss. And then they play, again, teams in the bottom conference, like Tyler said a minute ago about SMU. They play Virginia. They play Duke. They play Boston College. They play Stanford. And then, again, the all-important game on Saturday, November the 9th, where if you look at Virginia Tech's schedule, there's a really good chance that Virginia Tech could go into that game with only 1 loss on November the 9th, hosting Clemson in Blacksburg with a possibility of an ESPN game day appearance. That could be just an incredible experience overall for Blacksburg and for Virginia Tech. But I've got Virginia Tech over 8.5 wins because I personally got them going 10-2. So what are your thoughts on the Hokies, Ty?
I'm with you. I'm with you on this one. And all I have to say is welcome to the era of unbalanced schedules and conferences.
Yeah,
we talked about that. I mean, we talked about SMU's schedule being 66 out of 68. Virginia Tech's is 65th out of 68. So right up there with SMU. They don't play Florida State. They don't play Louisville. They don't play NC State. They don't play North Carolina. They don't play SMU.
Nope.
You mentioned the schedule. And then you look at who they have returning. Now think about who are the 5 most important people in the facility, right? You got your head coach. You got both coordinator positions, the offensive coordinator, the defense coordinator, probably the strength and conditioning coach, and then your starting quarterback. Virginia Tech is one of only 32 teams in the FBS who can say that they have all 5 of those guys coming back this year.
Hey, you're bringing the numbers out. I see you.
And they return 91% of their production, like you talked about, everybody coming back. Yeah, man, I'm with you. I mean, I think 10-2 as well. And I'm not worried about Virginia Tech being up for those games against, especially that game against Clemson, right? I'm not worried about them being up for that. I'm worried about, honestly, the Stanford game at Stanford.
Dude, 100% agree.
Or the week before you host Clemson, you go up to what we call it, the Carrier Dome in Syracuse, New York, and you play the new look Fran Brown Syracuse Orange.
You're spot on, man. The two spots on this schedule that I see trouble spots for sure, or at the Carrier Dome and at the farm at Stanford. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. So I still think they can get there. Our guy Kelly, he's a little lower on them than we are, obviously, but 8.5. It's a lofty number for a team that, hasn't. They've been pretty average over the last 5-10 years. I think 8.5 is a lofty number, but obviously Vegas sees something in them too. We like them for possible double digit wins here. So both of us are on Virginia Tech over 8.5. My next one. Oh boy, it might shock some people. I'm gonna have faith in Mac Brown, and Mac Brown's kind of like he's one of those coaches. Obviously, he's one of the 3 active coaches that has a national title under his belt right now. But he's kind of like guys like Mike Gundy. Obviously, he hasn't been in North Carolina forever, but he's been coaching college football forever, right? And when he's under the radar, that's when he does his best work. Obviously, the last couple of years, they've had top 5 quarterbacks in Sam Howell and Drake May, and they did not get expectations. This year, the win total is set at 7.5. And we talked about SMU's schedule. We talked about Virginia Tech's schedule. North Carolina's schedule is easier than the both of them. It's 67 out of 68. You see a theme here with the unbalanced schedules, right? Yep. And targeting these win totals. They have the second easiest schedule in the ACC. They avoid Clemson. They avoid Louisville. They avoid Miami. They avoid SMU. They avoid Virginia Tech. We talked about their defense a couple episodes ago being just a sieve, right? Just leaking like a sieve. Jeff Collins was a great hire. We both said that.
They are the antithesis of Iowa. They're literally the same as Iowa, just as far as flip-flop offense, defense. Their offense has been incredible, and their defense has been trash. Obviously, Iowa's offense is the pun of all jokes, and their defense is incredible.
Yeah. Look at the schedule, too. You open up on a Thursday night at Minnesota. Do not be surprised if they fall to Max Brosmer and the Gophers to open the season. But then they have a possibility of rattling off 6 or 7 straight wins. I mean, they got Charlotte, North Carolina Central, and James Madison all at home. Mm-hmm. They travel to Duke for the Battle of the Victory Bell, and we're both very low on Duke, I believe, this year. Yep. So that's an easily winnable game for them. And then the 2 more home games after that, Pitt and Georgia Tech. Obviously, playing at home is no lock to win, but playing home is a lot better than playing on the road.
All those games you just named, they've got a great chance of being favored.
Exactly. So that's 6 games right there that they could just rattle off. Before they get a bye week, they go to Virginia, again, a winnable game. And then gets a little tougher at Florida State, Wake Forest at home, at Boston College, NC State to finish off the season in that rivalry game. But 7.5, I think, is just too low. I think, like I said, those 6 games after Minnesota are very winnable. So you're telling me you just got to get 2 more after that, either at Virginia, home against Wake Forest, at Boston College. You win 2 of those 3, and you've cleared it. So I'm taking Mac Brown and the Tar Heels over 7.5 wins this year.
Yeah, and something that might make you feel a little bit better about that too is we saw last year as if he needed any more indictments. Haynes King, what he did at Georgia Tech last year after getting out of Jimbo Fisher's shadow and playing somewhere else, and as good as Haynes King was last year at Georgia Tech, I wonder if Max Johnson getting away from that archaic system at the Jimbo that they had. I mean, again, couldn't be more opposite of a type of offense he's probably going to be able to run here at North Carolina if they keep the same style and the same type of offense, which I'm sure they are. So I'm wondering if Max Johnson can make that big of a leap too, like Haynes King did last year at Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
And of course, you had him on your list. I mean, he should be on everybody's list. Amarian Hampton, running back, over 1,000 yards last year. He's back at tailback. They got a couple good transfers that they brought in as well. So, I mean, the fact that schedule is where it's at, that's not a bad pick there, man.
Yeah.
I'm just going to take a little stroll down Tobacco Road and head to Old Durham.
Yep.
And old Manny Diaz is the new head coach there in Durham. And Manny Diaz is, again, what an incredible job he did at Penn State as defensive coordinator. And he's got his work cut out for him in Durham, following up what Mike Elko did the 2 years that Elko had there in Durham. Duke has a win total of 5.5.
Way
I
too
got a
high.
couple. Do what?
Way too high.
It is, man. It is. And that's actually dropped a little bit. I wish that we could have recorded this a couple of weeks ago because it was at like 6.5. It was at 6.5. Then it was down to 6. Then it's all the way down to 5.5. So I'm chasing a number a little bit right here now. But again, man, when I look at this schedule, I just can't. I can't find 6 wins on this schedule. I mean, I'm looking at it now. We'll just talk about that first. If they lose, they play Elon right out of the gate, they're going to win that game. But if they play the following week on a Friday night at Northwestern, if they lose that game, which again, they're probably going to be a slight underdog in that game at Northwestern, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, Northwestern's a solid team.
Right. I mean, didn't they win like 8 games last year?
They did. I mean, they're playing in like a 10,000 seat stadium on Lake Michigan right now, but
Oh, I know, dude. Well, by the way, perfect Friday night type game. Like,
yeah.
It's almost like Friday Night Lights. Like, looks like worse than a Texas high school football stadium. But at Northwestern on Friday, September the 6th, if they lose that game, it's cashed. They're not getting to 6 wins if they lose that game. But they play UConn right after that, and UConn, not a bad football team that they bring. That's not a guaranteed win at all. Then they're at Middle Tennessee State. I'll give them a win there. But I mean, in all of these games, in all of their conference games, right now, they are projected to be an underdog in every single conference game.
Yep.
So one of the other things I wanted to touch on that was, so the fact that they are projected to be an underdog, North Carolina, at Georgia Tech, Florida State, SMU, at Miami, at NC State, Virginia Tech, and then finish the season at Wake. If you have a shop where, I know DraftKings, I'm pretty sure offers it, but if you have a shop where you can look at conference wins, I like Duke under 5.5 on the season win total, but also take a look at Duke under 2.5 conference wins. Where are they going to win 3 conference games on that schedule? Like, even if you're being very generous, and I'm saying very generous, and you have them beating Wake Forest at Wake Forest and upsetting North Carolina and Durham, where are they getting the 3rd? They're not. So, but I mean, I didn't give that out as my official pick under 2.5 because it's not fair to a lot of folks because a lot of folks aren't able to get that. So under 5.5 season total and under 2.5 conference wins if you can get it. But as far as the play on the field, I mean, they got some decent skill players. I mean, quarterback Malik Murphy transferred in from Texas. Their number 2 tailback from last year's back, and Jaquez Moore, who rushed for about 6 yards per carry. They've got all 3 of their starting receivers back, but they literally lost almost their entire depth chart on the offensive lines and defensive lines. Manny Diaz was in the spring having to bring in 8 transfer offensive linemen, 5 from the FCS level, just to be able to field a depth chart at offensive line and be able to have a spring game so they could actually block for their quarterback in the spring game. Defense returns, 3 starters overall, but they were their top 3 tacklers last year. But bad news is, again, they lost almost their entire defensive line to the NFL or the transfer portal. To show you how good of a job Mike Elko did there, the defensive linemen that they lost in the transfer portal, 1 went to Oregon, 1 went to Notre Dame, 1 went to Virginia Tech, and the other one went to Auburn. That was their 4 D linemen they had last year. So it shows you what kind of job Elko did. But I'll take Duke under 5.5 wins. And again, if you can get the conference wins, under 2.5 as well in conference wins.
Again, man, we're lined up there. Duke under 5.5. It's just it's a solid rebuild for Manny Diaz. I mean, like you mentioned, extreme roster turnover, O-line, D-line, quarterback, you name it, all gone. Yep. Only 58% production returning. Again, the schedule too. I mean, that schedule we named off for ACC standards. I mean, Carolina, Georgia Tech, Florida State, SMU, Miami. I mean, that's only the 5th toughest in the conference. Which is crazy. And that's not, they don't play Clemson or Louisville. So it is tough to see them going bowling this year. So yeah, if you can get 5.5 right now, I'd take Duke under 5.5.
Yep.
So I mentioned SMU, Wake Forest, North Carolina, Duke, Virginia Tech. I've got one more because we were lined up on a couple of them there. I just got one more for us. It's Virginia, Charlottesville, Tony Elliott. 3 wins in 2022, 3 wins in 2023. The win total's at 4.5. Okay, the quarterback play has been extremely shaky.
Yep.
Our guy Kelly only has them favored in 3 games right now. I got to keep riding the trend. I mean, it may be his best roster he's had yet, but I think under 4.5 is another solid bet for Virginia. And again, it's all schedule related. I mean, for Virginia, I mean, they ranked 34th out of 68 for schedule difficulty. So it's a tough schedule. At Wake Forest, week 2, that's kind of a toss-up game, but they're going to be underdogs there. They get Maryland at home. Michael Oxley's bringing his bunch in, but, that's going to be tough to win too. At Coastal Carolina in week 4. I mean, it's big when these G5 teams get to host these power conference teams.
Yep.
And I mean, props to Virginia for going to play them there, but they'll be favored in that game, but I don't think it'll be as big as some people might think. You get a bye, you get a couple home games against Boston College and Louisville, and then you start playing at Clemson, home against North Carolina. They're one of the teams in the ACC that draws Notre Dame, and much less they draw them on the road this year.
Yep.
That's tough. And then SMU, Virginia Tech. Their last 3 games, Notre Dame, SMU, Virginia Tech. That's tough. So getting to 5 wins, I mean, you're talking about beating Richmond. You're talking about beating Coastal Carolina, beating Boston College at home. I'll give them that one. That's 3 wins. They're going to have to pull 2 more upsets against either Louisville, Clemson, North Carolina, Pitt, Notre Dame, SMU, Virginia Tech, Maryland. I just don't see it. So I'm going to take Virginia under 4.5.
I'm with you. That was one of mine as well. UVA under 4.5 for all the reasons you just said. I had a little hesitancy because I'm trying to, when I'm doing this stuff, I try to play devil's advocate against myself, to try to find some other, some positives instead of just negatives. And Virginia had a lot of one score, like one possession losses last year. They bring back, I think it's like the 10th most returning production in the country. But here's the thing with that. It falls in line with some people talk about, well, they've got all these returning starters back. They've got a lot of returning starters back from a 3-win team. And their schedule is tougher this year than it was last year. So I had them at, if it could end up getting a little close, I had them at 4. I was giving them 4. But like you said, though, even at 4 wins, that means they're upsetting, like a pretty big upset over somebody to even get to 4. So I'm with you on that. And my last one, I'm going to stay in that Raleigh-Durham area there in the great state of North Carolina. And I'm going to take a look at NC State over 8.5. And Tyler, NC State and Dave Duran, they're one of 5 teams in the country to post 4 straight seasons of 8+ wins in each season.
Easiest schedule in the ACC.
That's right. And the other 4 teams that do what they did, what I just said, Bama, Georgia, Notre Dame, and Clemson. And then the 5th, NC State. One of 5 teams to post 4 straight seasons of 8+ wins. God, the way they finished last year in the regular season was insane. They finished the season 5-0 in the regular season, outscored their opponents 144-77 during that win streak. That included games against Clemson, Miami, at Virginia Tech, and North Carolina. So 4 solid teams out of those 5 wins were against those squads. And, dude, I love the coaching continuity with Dave Duran being back, offensive coordinator Robert O'Nien, one of the better defensive coordinators in the country, and Tony Gibson. He made my top 12 defensive coordinators in the country for what he's done the last few years. I mean, defensively, he runs that 3-3-5 scheme. And, I mean, they've only got 3 starters back on the defense, but, dude, I trust Tony Gibson, man. I mean, they've had plenty of guys that's got some meaningful snaps. I feel like I can count on Gibson to get things right. I mean, they've finished as a top 30 defense in the country in scoring defense and total defense in the last 3 years straight. So, I mean, the guy just, again, has a system. It's just, next man up, replace him, it's fine. But the reason why I love this NC State team is schedule, like you just said, but offensively, in a long, long time, this is easily the best skill position group that NC State's had in a long time. Bringing in Grayson McCall, 3-time Sun Belt Player of the Year from Coastal Carolina. Dude's had more than 10,000 yards passing 88 touchdowns to only 14 interceptions in his career. Dude, what I love about him is he obviously can adapt. Like the change of him going from the group of 5 to the power 5. He was a triple option quarterback in high school and became a prolific passer in the Jamie Chadwell spread option attack. And so, I mean, he's got plenty of weapons he's going to be slinging it to. Your boy KC Concepcion, like people have been saying on Twitter recently, if you don't know who KC Concepcion is, you better learn the name. Dude was ACC Rookie of the Year last year, was the only player in the nation with 750-plus receiving yards and 250-plus rushing yards, and he led all freshmen across the entire country with 10 receiving touchdowns last year. Jordan Waters at tailback, Duke transfer, rushed for almost 6 yards a carry and 12 touchdowns last year. He was the number 6 running back in the portal. Gives NC State a little something they've been missing the last couple of years in the run game. Ohio State transfer wide receiver who was a former top 10 receiver in the country out of high school as a recruit from the state of North Carolina. That's Noah Rogers. And Wesley Grimes, former 4-star recruit out of high school, transferred in from Wake. Justin Jolly, the number 2 overall tight end in the transfer portal from UConn. And they brought in 2 exciting freshmen that one's a track star. The other was one of the top players in the state of North Carolina, Terrell Anderson and Jonathan Taylor. They're 2 big-time incoming freshman playmakers that there are already words coming out of fall camp that they're going to get some playing time, going to see the rock a little bit. Multiple offensive linemen back. They lost their center, but they replaced him with the top center in the country in the transfer portal, a multi-year starter from Tyler's Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and Zeke Correll. So, again, schedule, what they've got coming back, coaching continuity. I like NC State over 8.5. I mean, I'm looking at their ACC schedule. They play at Clemson on September the 21st, and that's it. From the top-tier teams in the conference. They don't play Florida State. They don't play Miami. They don't play Louisville. They don't play Virginia Tech. And they don't play SMU. They've got arguably, I don't care what the numbers say. I mean, they may say this, but they've got the easiest schedule, in my opinion, of any of the teams that are near the top in the conference. So let's just say they lose to Tennessee Saturday, September the 7th, in one of the sneakiest, best non-conference games of the year, and then they lose in Death Valley September 21st at Clemson. They would have to lose 2 more games in games that they're going to be favored, and not only favored, they're going to be heavily favored in a lot of these games. Georgia Tech, North Carolina, Duke, Stanford, Cal, Syracuse at home, Wake Forest at home, Northern Illinois at home, La Tech, Louisiana Tech at home, Western Carolina home. So I like
tough to see them losing at Carter Finley Stadium.
Right, exactly. So I've got them going 10-2. Dave Duran's been chasing that illustrious 10th win in the 10th win season for a while. Yeah. I think he gets it this year. Yeah. I think they go 10-2 this year.
It's a solid pick. I like it. Before we get to our ACC championship game and championship winner picks, let's throw out a dark horse pick to make the ACC championship game. I've been to, if you guys haven't been to it, I went to playoffpredictors.com. You can go to the conference and you can go week by week and you can pick winners of games. And I looked it over 2, maybe 3 times, and I kept coming back to it. And I kept coming back to one of the teams that I had over on the win totals, and that was North Carolina. Again, like you said, if Max Johnson can make that, post Jimbo Fisher leap there, he's got his brother there at tight end. Again, Marion Hampton at running back. If the defense can just be average and stop some teams, I think they will have a great shot. I mean, I've got them finishing as good as 10-2 and top 4 in the conference. Ooh, the frustrating thing we've talked about is none of the conferences have announced what their tiebreakers are going to be. Yeah. So I mean, I could see them going. I've got 4 teams right now at 7-1 in the conference. So obviously, I had North Carolina possibly losing that game to Minnesota. 7-1 in the conference, and so I just went head to head first. And then I went, based on common opponents second. So I didn't have them quite in the championship game, but I've got North Carolina as a dark horse pick to make the ACC championship game. I think you can find that around like 10-1, plus 1,000 to win the ACC to get that coveted playoff spot. 30-1 plus 3,000 right now on DraftKings.
Nice, man. Well, I'm going to give me 1 second here. Team that I've got as a dark horse is the Virginia Tech Hokies. Plus 1,000, six best odds in the country to win the ACC. And so I think that this year with Brent Pry and all the returning production with Kyron Drones at quarterback, if he lives up to the hype and Blacksburg gets rocking again behind this team, it could be a very exciting year for Virginia Tech. So my dark horse team is the Hokies. I like Virginia Tech's chances here at plus 1,000 to possibly make the ACC championship game. And again, on a neutral field, there is not a lot that separates a lot of these teams in this conference this year, kind of like what we've talked about with the Big 12. There isn't, like the Florida State and Clemson's, et cetera, is not as just dominant going into the year. That's what we think. Maybe they turn out to be. But they're not going into this year right now. They're not as dominant as we think they are. So I think that like a team like you just mentioned, North Carolina or Virginia Tech, if they can get in that ACC title game on a neutral field, who knows what happens. So I'll take Virginia Tech as a dark horse at plus 1,000 to win the ACC.
Real quick before we get to our championship game picks, do you think, if you had to put money on it, is ACC a multi-bid league in the CFP this year?
Oh, me. I mean, it could be, because I still think that if the brands of Clemson, Florida, and it's, again, shouldn't be how it is. We hate it. Any college football fan should hate it. But the brands that are Florida State, Miami, and Clemson still carry a lot more weight than some of the other brands in the Big 12. That if for Florida State is sitting there at 10-2, and if Florida State's sitting there at 10-2, and there's a bunch of other 10-2 teams, and the Noles get left out of the dance again, yeah. So that's just an example of what I'm talking about. So I do think that the ACC could get 2 in.
Okay. Championship game picks time. I'm gonna let you go first.
Well, just like you said, we don't know the tiebreaker deal. And I think in maybe every Power 4 conference, the tiebreaker is going to come into play now without divisions and these unbalanced schedules, et cetera. So without knowing the tiebreaker, I think there could be 4 teams at the end of the year with the exact same record. That's because that's what I've got that I'm looking at right now. I've got 4 with the same conference record. So without knowing the tiebreaker, I'm going to say Clemson versus Miami, with Clemson and Dabo bringing home, buying all the freaking stock I can get. Clemson bringing home the ACC championship this year, bringing it back to Death Valley Mid.
Okay. Again, I've got 4 teams all finishing 7-1 in the conference.
Me too.
Clemson is not one of them.
Okay.
But I've got a good old-fashioned game that everyone who touched on our rivalry list said that we were idiots for not including this rivalry game on there.
Ooh, if we get this in the ACC championship game, come on, man, bring it to me.
I just want
to hear the 2 names.
I got the Noles and the Canes.
Let's go, baby.
And meeting up in Charlotte,
of all places, in the ACC title.
Meeting up in Charlotte. We talked about Miami already. They just loaded up Cam Ward, Damian Martinez, Simeon Barrow. I mean, all these guys they got in the transfer portal. It's Mario's easily his most stacked roster he's had as a head coach. Big game, to lead off at Florida, but it's not a conference game. So
you got Florida State 10. You got Florida State 10-2.
I got Florida State and Miami at 10-2.
Okay,
both of them. So I do think the ACC is a 1-bid league this year. I mean, you get the third. I mean, it's unfortunate to say you get a third loss from one of those 2 teams. It just depends on what happens in the other conferences. I don't know. But I can't believe I'm saying this about them. I've got Miami winning the ACC championship game.
Hitching the wagon to Mario Cristobal. Well, hey, man, the roster's legit, dude. I mean, it is.
I mean, I just think it's this year. This is their year to take the leap. Last year was Texas, right? Can Texas get over the hump? Can they get to the playoff? I think it's just Miami this year. Can they? And really, it's can the head coaching staff and all that? Can they stay out of their own way? Let the players do their thing. Run a good offense for them. The schedule is tough by ACC standards, but not tough by national standards. Obviously, they've got the road game against Florida, but I mean, they get Virginia Tech at home. They get Florida State at home, so I think it's a rematch. I think they're going to beat Florida State twice this year.
Well, Pick Six Previews pointed it out. It's been the last few years we've had a program revival. We had Tennessee a couple of years ago with Hendon Hooker and that Tennessee bunch. And then last year, you mentioned it just now, Texas. Could Miami? Could it be the year of the Canes for their revival? Could it be Virginia Tech and Brent Pry? Could it be both this year? But what I'll say that I like most about this Canes team is everybody's going to talk about the skill position. We all know how good the receiving core, bringing in Damian Martinez, Cam Ward, et cetera, is. But what Mario has done in the recruiting and talent acquisition level on the offensive and defensive lines, on the line of scrimmage, is what I think that separates them now than what they've had the last few years. And I want to mention something on Florida State, too. All the players that they lost last year from that last year's squad, if they do put up a 10-2, 11-1 type year, I mean, it's obvious. I mean, it's obvious then that Norvell really does have it rolling down in Tallahassee, and they're just going to do this one year after another going forward.
Yeah. All in all, I've got 10 teams from the ACC going bowling this year. And so, again, we knocked out our win totals for the ACC. Again, SMU over 8, Wake Forest over 4.5, UNC over 7.5, Duke under 5.5, Virginia Tech over 8.5, and Virginia under 4.5 wins for me. Lance?
Again, I've got Clemson over 8.5. I've got Virginia Tech over 8.5. Virginia Tech over 8.5 too is plus money at plus 124. I've got Duke under 5.5. Tough year for first year for head coach Manny Diaz. Again, if you can get it, also conference wins, take a shot at Duke under 2.5 conference wins as well. And then I've got NC State and Dave Duran going over 8.5 with, my opinion, the easiest schedule in the ACC of any of the contenders. My dark horse team, Virginia Tech, to win the ACC at plus 1,000. If you want to take a shot, it's a longer odds. And then again, I've got Clemson playing Miami in the ACC championship game with Dabo and Clemson bringing an ACC title back to Clemson.
Back to their rightful spot at the top of the conference.
Man, that was fun.
Again, we're less than 3 weeks away from two of these teams, just clashing in Ireland, Florida State and Georgia Tech, kicking us off week 0, August 24th. We're going to be back and better than ever. Starting now, we're going to be back 2 times a week so that you can hear a lot more from us. Again, thank you guys for listening. Next up on the Win Total episodes is going to be the Big 12 Conference, the Conference of America, the Conference of Chaos. So we're going to be ready to hit those hard and, try to cash some tickets, try to earn you guys some money. It's going to be a good season this year. So again, thank you guys for listening. Keep listening, keep subscribing, keep sending it to friends, everything. We appreciate you guys so much. And until next time.